All right, thank you, Sheriff Greg. All right, it's always a pleasure to be with you for Vacation Bible School. I always enjoy this time of the year. I always enjoy seeing the kids up, excited about learning and growing, and seeing adults as well, encouraging them, doing all we can to minister to them. So don't ever think that your time that you're investing in your children is not worthwhile. This is valuable time. I have memories myself of VBS with our kids when they were younger, and they still have great memories of that and have been blessed by that. Now we have three granddaughters, and they're going through VBS as well, so enjoy that time. I've never had a theme like Wild Wild West, though. Wild West faith, so interesting theme, but I appreciate the way you all have adapted it. It fits well with my topic tonight. As you see Joshua and the Israelites going into the land of Canaan, which is kind of like the Wild Wild West. They're going into an area that they're unfamiliar with, and God is leading them, God is guiding them as they go into that area, and God is enabling them to conquer the enemy, to do what he has promised them that they would have as they go into this uncharted territory. A lot of history here. Some of you may not have read about the story about the sun standing still, and so I want to give you some background to some of that as we get into the lesson tonight. I want to begin with this statement, though, based upon Luke 1:37. With God, nothing is ever impossible, and no word from God shall be without power or impossible of fulfillment. And that was based upon that passage in Luke 1:37 when the angel Gabriel comes to Mary, the virgin mother of Jesus. She's not pregnant at that time. She's going to the home of Elizabeth, her cousin. And she's just been informed that she will become the mother of Jesus. And the angel tells her, nothing is too hard for God. Because, Mary's wondering, how's this going to happen? How's this going to come about? I'm not married. I've been with no man. And yet the angel assures her that nothing is impossible with God. And as an evidence, he says, look at your cousin, Elizabeth. She was barren. She's old now. And at this time, she's 6 months pregnant. And so just proving the fact that nothing is too hard for God. Which brings us to the question, what is a miracle? What is a miracle? If you were to define the term miracle tonight, I want to hear from some of you. How would you define a miracle? We use that term today rather loosely, sometimes not in a biblical way, but sometimes we have to go back and redefine words based upon the Bible. And so how would you define miracle? Anybody? What is a miracle? Okay. Supernatural, outside the ability of humans to perform. Anybody else? Something that is unexplainable. You cannot explain it, cannot understand it. Okay? Good definitions, all right? Well, there are three Greek words in the New Testament that are used to describe what we call a miracle. And all three of them are used in two passages. You'll see one of them on the screen, Peter's first gospel sermon after the resurrection of Jesus, Acts 2, verse 22. He begins to talk about what's happened with the Spirit coming up on all of the apostles. And then he uses that as an opportunity to talk about Jesus. Jesus was a man approved or credited by God to you by miracles. That's one word. The Greek word is dunamis. Same word from which we get the word gospel. The gospel is the power of God. The word power, dunamis. Same word from which we get the word dynamite. Dynamite, I'll say. So miracles are powerful works. And then another word is wonders. Wonders. The Greek word teros, wonders. And then the Greek word semeion for signs. All three of those can be translated miracle. They have reference to miracles, but in particular, they're translated powerful works, wonders, or signs. And Peter is saying God did these works among you while he was here. As many of you know, he says, as you yourselves know. So imagine this group of thousands of Jews gathered on the day of Pentecost. And they're hearing this sermon. They've been around Jesus. They've seen his miracles. They've seen people healed, demons cast out, people raised from the dead. They've witnessed all of that. And so Peter is reminding them that Jesus is no stranger. He has been approved of, he's been credited among you by all of these miracles, signs, and wonders that God did through him when he was among you. Second passage is Hebrews 2. Hebrews 2 verse 4 uses the same three words in a different order. You see wonders is still in the middle, but it starts from semeion, signs on the bottom, and then going up, semeion, teros, and dunamis. Signs, wonders, and various miracles. God also testified to this salvation that the writer is talking about, that we would be cheating ourselves if we neglect so great a salvation that God has provided. And this salvation was testified to by these signs, wonders, and miracles and gifts of the Holy Spirit distributed according to his will. So on the screen, you see the definition of each of those words. Dunamis can be translated power, mighty work, or miracle. It denotes power of a supernatural origin, okay? A character that could not be produced by natural means. Reminds me of the Simon the sorcerer in Acts chapter 8. When Simon saw the miracles that Philip was doing, even he was amazed. He could not do that. I mean, he had some type of power, some type of demonic sorcery power, but it did not compare to the power of these miracles that God was doing through Philip. Okay, so he was astonished by the great signs and miracles, dunamis, he saw. The second word is teros, which means wonder, which talks about the effect that these signs and miracles have upon people. I mean, we're amazed. We are left astonished. We are wondering what happened. We can't explain it. There's no logical explanation. It defies natural law. And then the final word, semeion, used quite often in the book of John. John gives all these signs, many different signs that Jesus did among his disciples that are written down for our learning, that we may know that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, and that by believing in him we may have life in his name. Okay? Signs were valuable not so much for what they are, but for what they indicate. They point to something else. For example, the signs that followed these apostles, it pointed to the confirmation of the word, that the word they were presenting came from God. Okay? So again, what is a miracle? If we were to define it a little bit more, Thayer's Greek-English lexicon says it's a sign, a prodigy, a portent, an unusual occurrence. It transcends the common course of nature. It's use of miracles and wonders by which God authenticates the men sent by him, or by which men prove the cause they are pleading is of God. Okay? Mounce's complete dictionary of Old and New Testament word says these are extraordinary deeds of God. Extraordinary, beyond the ordinary, beyond the usual that we face every day. Okay? Something that transcends human powers and the laws of nature, and they're done often to prove that God was working through this person or this particular act, through the one performing that particular act. So only God can really perform miracles. Okay, and I say that because we use the word somewhat flippantly to talk about all kinds of things. Let me give you an example. A football team scoring a touchdown and winning the game with only 16 seconds left. I mean, you might call that a miracle. It's amazing. I mean, we leave in great wonder, but technically that's not a miracle. Okay, that's not God performing that, and that's not defying any law of nature that God has put in place. Okay? So we're going to look at some miracles this evening, but I want to give you a history of miracles. When were miracles in the Bible most prevalent? Can you name some period of times when miracles in the Bible were most prevalent? In the New Testament, certainly. During the time of Jesus and the apostles. What were some other times in the Old Testament when they were most prevalent? Yes. During the time of Moses, when they were coming out of Egypt. All these signs and wonders, all these plagues that God performed through Moses and Aaron. Yes, ma'am, you were saying something? Yes. During the time of Baal. You all hit both of those, I mean, all three of those right on the head, okay? The time of Moses and the children of Israel, the time of Elijah, the prophet, as he encountered the prophets of Baal, proving that God is God and not Baal, and then the time of Jesus and the apostles. So those three times you see an abundance of miracles being done by God. And God is showing us something during those times. He's emphasizing that I am God, that I am supreme, that I am the one and only higher power. In spite of what the magical people may do down in Egypt, in spite of what Baal may say on Mount Carmel, in spite of these sorcerers and demons and other powers during the time of Jesus, God is God. He is supreme. He reigns over all, okay? And especially during these last days, God has used those signs to point to this great salvation that he's made available for all of us, that he was leading up to, that all of these historical times, even the Old Testament, the patriarchal age, the Mosaic age, and now the Christian age, which is the final age, all of those previous ages were pointing to the time when God would send his son and he would provide this great salvation that God had in mind from the very beginning of time. Hebrews 2, these two passages that we've seen already, both of these use all three of these terms for miracles. Hebrews 2, our great salvation was first announced by the Lord himself. Then it was confirmed to us by those who heard him. That would be his apostles. They were able to do the same miracles that Jesus did, signs, wonders, and various gifts and miracles of the Holy Spirit. Acts 2:22, Jesus was the man accredited by God to you by miracles, wonders, and signs done by God among you. You saw them. You witnessed them. You knew that was something amazing, that was something the ordinary person could not do. All right, so as we look at miracles today, okay, we're not in a time where people can lay their hands on you and heal you. Oh, there are folk who claim that, right? There are people who make that claim. I submit to you that it's a fake claim. They would even get money from that. I mean, Peter said, "Silver and gold have I none, but such as I have, I give to you." Peter didn't charge for it. And so what we see happening today does not compare to the miracles that we see happening in the time of Moses, the time of Elijah, and the time of Jesus. God still has the power to perform miracles, but he does not work through miracles as he did back then. Okay? God has already proven that he is God. He's already shown that his word came from God, that this is a word not made up, that God inspired it, and he's already recorded the confirmation of his word in Scripture. When someone has been convicted or acquitted of a crime, he's had his trial, he's been proven innocent, does he need to keep on being tried over and over again for that same crime? No. If you want to know whether he's innocent or guilty, you go to the record, pull down the record, and it will confirm that on such and such a date, he had his trial, he was proven to be innocent. Well, God's word has been confirmed. It's been proven to be factual. It's been proven to come from him. It has been confirmed. And once it's confirmed, it does not need to be continually confirmed over and over again. You'll remember even during the time of Jesus, the Jews asked for multiple signs, right? Even though he had given them many, they always wanted one more. Give me one more sign. And Jesus even told them finally, no sign will be given except the sign of Jonah. As Jonah was 3 days in the belly of the fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the grave, and God will raise him from the dead. And that was the final sign that God gave to these Jews who were constantly disbelieving, but just wanting one more sign, when God has given enough already. So the final point here is that today God works through providence, meaning that he provides what is needed to accomplish his purposes. And so I don't go to a miracle worker to ask for a miracle. I mean, I can pray. We should be praying for God to work, and he will. He does. He works according to his will, according to his purposes. He still does amazing things, but not like he did during those 3 periods that we mentioned when miracles were so prevalent. All right? So tonight we're going to look at miracles in Joshua chapter 10. Okay, but before that I want to get some background. This section talks about a group of people called the Gibeonites. The Gibeonites, okay? If you turn in your Bibles to Joshua, you'll see some of that in Joshua 10. The Gibeonites. These people were very intelligent, very knowledgeable of the enemy. They're living in Canaan, and God is commanding his people to go in and utterly destroy the Canaanites. Look with me at Exodus 23. That's not on the screen, but I want to read that one. Exodus 23 and verse 31. God commands Moses and the Israelites, I will establish your borders from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, and from the desert to the river. I will hand over to you the people who live in the land, and you will drive them out before you. Do not make a covenant with them or with their gods. Do not let them live in your land, or they will cause you to sin against me, because the worship of their gods will certainly be a snare to you. Okay? God is a just God. God had tolerated the evil of these Amorites for so long. They had violated his will. God selected the Israelites to be his chosen people, but God is a God of the nations, and he holds all people accountable to him. And he's even holding these Amorites, these Canaanites, accountable to him. You remember in, this passage wasn't on my notes, but go back to Genesis, Genesis 15, I believe. Genesis 15, a promise that he makes to Abraham when he's renewing the covenant with Abram. Genesis 15, he tells Abraham, he puts Abram into a deep sleep, verse 12, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, verse 13, know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated 400 years. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your fathers in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here. But notice what he says in verse 16. For the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. So God is holding them accountable for their sin. And he's even patient, letting it reach its full measure, where God is getting fully fed up with the Amorites, with the Canaanites, and the evil that's going on in the land of Canaan. And just as he would vomit them up out of the land, he also said he would do that for the Israelites, right? If they disobeyed, if they were not faithful, he would vomit them up out of the land. Well, that time has come. Finally, we're at that fourth generation, and now the Israelites are going into the land. And God is telling them, don't spare anyone. Destroy everyone. Men, women, children, everything is to be utterly destroyed as a measure of God's justice against the evil and sin in the land of Canaan. Another passage here. He tells them, you may offer peace to the cities outside of Canaan. You may even form a treaty with them. Look at it in Deuteronomy 20, verse 10. It says, when you march up to attack a city, make its people an offer of peace. If they accept and open their gates, all the people in it shall be subject to forced labor and shall work for you. If they refuse to make peace and they engage you in battle, lay siege to that city. When the Lord your God delivers it into your hand, put to the sword all the men in it. As for the women, the children, the livestock, and everything else in it, you may take these as plunder for yourselves. And you may use the plunder the Lord your God gives you from your enemies. Notice verse 15. This is how you are to treat all the cities that are a distance from you and do not belong to the nations nearby. So all of the nations within the land of Canaan, they were to be utterly destroyed. But those cities far from you, you are allowed to make a treaty with them and spare them. Okay? And I say that because that's where the Gibeonites come in. The Gibeonites have done their homework. They know their enemy. They live in Canaan. They know that Joshua and the Israelites are coming into Canaan. They've heard about the fall of Jericho. They've heard about the fall of Ai. They've heard about the fall even on the other side of the Jordan River. They know that God is with these people. And they know that we are under a curse of destruction. But if we pretend as if we're from a distant land, they may spare us. Okay? So they come up with this great ruse, if you will, this trick to deceive Joshua and the leaders. Look at Exodus 34. That's on the screen, verse 10 through 12. Then the Lord said, I'm making a covenant with you. Before all your people I will do wonders. And I mention that passage because it uses the Hebrew word for miracles. And it's just wonders. Palah. They will do wonders. I mean, God will do wonders never before done in any nation in all the world. The people you live among will see how awesome is the work that I, the Lord, will do for you. Obey what I command you today. I will drive out before you the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. Be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land where you are going, or they will be a snare among you. So very clear instructions. I mean, God is very clear. He's not the author of confusion. When the confusion comes about, it comes about because of us, right? Things that we don't fully understand, or things that we don't want to do. But God is very clear in his instructions. So those that are in the land, you utterly destroy. Those that are far away, you may make a treaty with them. Okay? And the Gibeonites have done their homework. They know that. So therefore, they deceived Joshua and the leaders. Very interesting. It'd be a good way to have a play illustrating that. Look with me in Joshua 10. As these men put forth their little trick to deceive Joshua and the leaders. Joshua 10, Joshua 9. Verse 7. The men of Israel said to the Hivites, but perhaps you live near us. As they talked with them, let's back up a little bit. Verse 3. When the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse, which is a trick, an action of deception. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended. The men put worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. All the bread of their food supply was dry and moldy. Then they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and the men of Israel, we have come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us. And the men of Israel began to ponder this thing out. They thought among themselves, but perhaps you live near us. How then can we make a treaty with you? I mean, we know what God has told us. But the men come back and say, we are your servants. But Joshua said, who are you and where do you come from? Again, they're very convincing. They even told them, drop down to verse 11, our elders and all those living in our country said to us, take provisions for your journey, go and meet them and say to them, we are your servants, make a treaty with us. This bread of ours was warm when we packed it at home on the day we left to come to you. But now see how dry and moldy it is? And these wineskins that we filled were new. But see how cracked they are? And our clothes and sandals are worn out by the very long journey. All right. Put yourself in the shoes of these Israelites. You know what God has said, but you got these people standing in front of you, wanting to be friends, wanting to make a treaty, okay? The Bible says the men of Israel sampled their provisions, but they did not inquire of the Lord. So they looked at the bread, they maybe tasted some of it. They looked at the sandals, saw how worn out they were, the old clothes, the cracked wineskins. They used their understanding and did not consult God. Okay? What happened after they defeated Jericho. Did they win the battle against Ai? No. Initially, they did not. Why? Achan. Okay? God knew something that they didn't know. God knew that there was sin in the camp. Joshua was down on his face, praying, crying out to God, God, why have you defeated us like this? And causing 36 men to be killed with the battle of Ai. So God knew something that they did not know. God knew there was sin in the camp. Well, here God knows something that they don't know. But they're not seeking God. They're going on their own insight. They're going on their own understanding. They've inspected the provisions of these Gibeonites, and they decide that's enough. These people are not near, they've come from a distance, when in fact they were only 25 miles away, right? They had deceived them, okay? And the hope, they were able to do it because the Israelites had access to the voice of God, but they settled for a few mouthfuls of stale food, as one author would say. And how many times have we had access to God through prayer, through His Word, through someone close to us who's spiritual minded, but yet we went on what we knew, what we understood. We got the big head. We became prideful. We said, I got this. I know what I'm doing. And we didn't consult God. We left God out. And that's what these Israelites are doing. Evidently they had not learned the lesson from the defeat at Ai. They got ahead of God in going to Ai. They said, well, we don't need the whole army anymore. We just need about 2,000 or 3,000 men, and we'll go up and defeat them. It's a small city. And because they had not listened to God and found out there was sin in the camp, they were utterly defeated. And they had to take care of that sin first, and then when they went back to fight Ai the second time, they were victorious. So the whole point is, how many times have we made promises that get ourselves into trouble? Because they made a promise to these Gibeonites. We're going to make a treaty with you. We're not going to destroy you. We're going to make a treaty of peace. Why? Because we believe that you're a great distance away from us. When on the map here, you see on the map that they were only, Gilgal is right about here. That's where the Israelites were camped at, and Gibeon is right there, only 25 miles away. And yet they had came to them pretending to be a long distance away in another country outside of Canaan. All right. So again, it just amazes me in my own journey, spiritual journey, how many times I myself get ahead of God, where God is saying, I want to have control in your life, and I keep taking back the steering wheel from Him. You've heard people talk about, well, God is my co-pilot. Well, God doesn't want to be your co-pilot. He doesn't need you to drive at all. You get in the back seat. Let Him do all of the driving, all of the steering. God knows where He's going. God knows where He's leading you. You just need to sit back and enjoy the ride. Follow Him. Let Him do the leading. But so often we want to push God out of the seat, and we want to take over. And that's what these Israelites are doing. They're not consulting Him in prayer. When you get up in the morning, don't forget to pray. When you lay down at night, don't forget to pray. When you make your plans and goals, make sure you include God in there. Make sure God is doing the leading. Otherwise, you may find yourself making promises that get you into trouble. Promises that take up more time than you really need to give because you did not think it through. Promises that take up more of your resources than you really have because you forgot to count the cost. Promises that backfire on us because we did not consult God in the beginning. Situations where we get the big head and try to wrestle back control from God, and we take over with only bits and pieces of information when God has the whole picture in mind. And God means us no harm. God is for us. I mean, Paul says if God is for us, then who can be against us? But we have to trust in God and let him do the leading. So this is a terrible mistake. They have made a treaty with these people whom God has already determined worthy of death and annihilation, but they make this treaty. And then they find out, 3 days later, verse 16, Joshua 9:16, 3 days after they made the treaty, the Israelites heard that they were neighbors living near them. So now what do? They make them into slaves. The honorable thing is that they do keep their word. Okay, I love that about the Israelites. They've gotten themselves into a fix. They've gone ahead of God. God is faithful to them in spite of their unfaithfulness. And so they decide we're going to make them slaves. They're going to be temple servants. They're going to be woodcutters and water carriers. And even when Joshua writes this book, that's what they're still doing when this book is written. So that's the background. That's where the Gibeonites come into play. These Israelites keep their word. They don't ruin or annihilate these Gibeonites. They make them servants. But at the same time, little do they know that they not only are responsible for not killing them, but also protecting them. Because as their servants now, they're obligated to take care of them, as you would any servant, anyone who's serving you and taking care of your property. Okay? So that's where this battle comes into play that we're going to look at tonight. The Gibeonites are attacked by a confederation of 5 Amorite kings. They're listed on the screen there. You got the king of Jerusalem, which is Jebus at this time, the king of Hebron, the king of Lachish, the king of Eglon, and the king of Jarmuth. Those kings are upset at Gibeon already because Gibeon deserted them. Gibeon made an alliance, a treaty with the enemy. So they're upset with Gibeon anyway. So the 5 of them decide we're going to attack Gibeon. I mean, their land is very important to us. We need this land. So they decide to form this confederation, this alliance of 5 kings, because 5 is stronger than just one. And we're going to go up against Gibeon and defeat them and gain this territory back because they betrayed us anyway. Okay? And that's when the Gibeonites send word to Joshua. Joshua, come help us. Come help us. So Joshua's committed not only to sparing their lives, but also to protecting them because they're allies now. And that's where this battle comes into play, where God is going to work his miracles. Now, keep in mind, God has already said, when you go into the land, I'm going to work my wonders. All of these wonders, all these signs and wonders, much like what I did in Egypt. I'm going to work some of those same wonders among these Canaanites to drive them out. and I will fight your battles for you. God promises to do that, and he's going to still do that even though they have disobeyed him. And there's a lesson in that for us today, right? So many times we are not faithful. We fail. We make mistakes. We take the steering wheel from God, and God corrects things in our lives, and then things get going well, and then we want to get back and wrestle the wheel away again. But God is faithful even when we're not faithful. God still works with us. God does not give up on us as long as we're constantly repenting and coming back to him. He's not willing that any should perish, 2 Peter 3 and verse 9, but that all should come unto repentance. But it'd be much better if we just let him do the driving, right? Let him have control. Let him have complete control of our lives. Then things will go a whole lot smoother in our lives if we just let him take ultimate and complete control. So the Israelites did not do that. They went ahead of God, just like they did at Ai. And now they have the Gibeonites being attacked, and now they feel obligated to go in and help them. And God being faithful, God is still going to be faithful to helping them defeat these people in the land of Canaan. And that's exactly what he does. There are two miracles in this battle. One that we'll be looking at predominantly tonight, but I don't want to leave out this first one, because God works two obvious miracles in this battle against all these kings. Look at it in Joshua 10. We want to read some of this together. Joshua 10. We'll pick up at verse number 5. Then the 5 kings of the Amorites, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, joined forces. They moved up with all their troops and took up positions against Gibeon and attacked it. The Gibeonites sent word to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal, 25 miles away. Do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us, because all the Amorite kings from the hill country have joined forces against us. So Joshua marched up from Gilgal with his entire army, including all the best fighting men. The Lord said to him, Joshua, do not be afraid of them. I have given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to withstand you. So again, in spite of your going ahead of me, I'm still with you. I have given them into your hand. Okay? Verse 9, after an all-night march from Gilgal, Joshua took them by surprise. The Lord threw them into confusion before Israel, who defeated them in a great victory at Gibeon. Israel pursued them along the road, going up to Beth Horon, and cut them down all the way to Azekah and Makkedah. As they fled before Israel on the road down from Beth Horon to Azekah, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them from the sky, and more of them died from the hailstones than were killed by the swords of the Israelites. A few months ago, we were getting ready to go to Wednesday night Bible class, and it was predicted that there was going to be a great hailstorm coming through Vicksburg. And we got on the news channels and researched that thing, and thankfully it bypassed us. It went south of us, but that was just a month or so ago when large hailstones were falling in this vicinity, okay? And you've been in some horrendous hailstorms, right? Hailstorms that damage your roof, that break windshields, that hurt people. It's even known that in the Himalayas, 200 people died from huge hailstones being hurled from the sky. So that's nothing unusual to have a hailstorm. But what's unusual here, what makes this a miracle, is the precise timing and the aim of these hailstones. They fell exactly upon the enemy, upon these 5 kingdoms that were fighting against Joshua and the Gibeonites. So that's a miracle, an obvious miracle. More were killed from these hailstones than were killed by the Israelites. So God was fighting the battle. God was working for them. So don't overlook that miracle, a very powerful miracle. Then the second one that gets more talk and more conversation is the sun standing still, the sun and the moon standing still. Okay? Joshua is winning the battle. All he needs is just a little more time. It's getting late in the day. It's probably about noontime now, but he's winning, and he wants some more time. He evidently concludes that if I had more time, I could just defeat this whole area, not just one or 2 kings, but I can just wrap up this whole section of Canaan if I just had more time. So he prays to God. He cries out to God, and God listens to him. He asks something that is amazing. God is already giving him the assurance that he's going to win the battle. So verse 12, on the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, O sun, stand still over Gibeon. O moon, over the valley of Ajalon. So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies. As it is written in the book of Jashar, the sun stopped in the middle of the day and delayed going down about a full day. There's never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a man. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. Then Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp at Gilgal. All right. The sun standing still. Maybe it looks something like that, I don't know. The sun standing still as they fight this battle. And as they completely rout the enemy, completely defeat all 5 of these kings and their warriors, and God gives them that great victory. Okay? This is, again, the last and greatest miracle recorded in the book of Joshua, also the one most widely discussed. How do you explain the sun standing still? Anybody? Anybody want to try to tackle that? How do you explain the sun standing still? And really, in our day and time, when in science you learn that the sun doesn't move, right? What really moves is the earth around the sun. Okay? But however you want to look at it with the technical eye or the scientific eye, a miracle did occur. And time stopped. Time stopped for probably a whole day. Enough time to give Joshua time to win this victory. Okay? How do you explain that? Well, my question is, I don't want to even try. God's miracles are meant to be believed, but they're never meant to be explained by man. Okay? How do you explain God stepping out on nothing and saying, let there be light, creating the whole universe? How do you explain the creation? How do you explain the virgin conception? Not the virgin birth, but the virgin conception. How do you explain that? How do you explain Peter and Jesus walking on the water? I've tried it. I can't do it, right? It's a miracle. How do you explain Jesus going to the graveyard and calling forth Lazarus, who has already started to go through the decomposition process? but God raises him from the dead, and that process is interrupted and brought back to the way he fully was. How do you explain all of that? There is no explanation, except it's a miracle. It's God working his wonders, God working his power. But how do you explain the sun stopping, the moon stopping? I mean, God giving them 24 extra hours. There's no explanation. But I do know, fact number one, I do know two things that are clear. Joshua prayed for a longer period of daylight to fully destroy the enemy forces. That's what he prayed for. That's what he asked for. And I do know, number two, he understood that his request had been granted. God gave him what he asked for. And there was no doubt but that God was fighting for Israel. So I don't try to explain the miracles of the Bible. I trust and I believe them. God said it. I believe it. That settles it. That's enough. God has given us his word. He's confirmed these things by these miracles, and many people saw these miracles. I think about the resurrection of Jesus. I wasn't there to witness his resurrection, but I do know he was raised. Paul even says about 500 people saw him, saw the resurrected Jesus. And he says, you can go talk to them. Some of them are still alive. And so many witnesses to that great miracle. So if I could explain all these miracles and explain how all of this stuff works, then I'd be God, right? God is God. There's so much mystery about him. That's what makes him God. And us human, we are made in the image of God. We have many qualities of God, but we're not God. His wisdom far outseeds ours. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. His ways higher than our ways. Isaiah says, as high as the heavens are above the earth, so are God's ways and God's thoughts above ours. Isaiah 55. And so the sun standing still. People have tried to explain it that in order for that to happen, God would have to break the laws of physics. He'd have to interrupt the circulation of the earth around the sun. He'd have to slow it down, or just all kinds of explanations. But God is one who put all that into motion to begin with, right? God created the laws of physics. God told the sea to come only so far and don't go any further. Most of the world is made up of water, but yet the water doesn't flood the entire earth. And God promised us that won't happen again. It happened during the days of Noah, but it never, ever again will that happen. God contains the seas and the oceans. All of those things are put in for us by his motion and his will. So let me conclude here tonight. The conclusion is nothing is impossible with God. God created the universe. He can do whatever he pleases with it. He can interrupt the motion of the planets. He can freeze the laws of physics. However you want to explain it. I don't even try to explain it. I just say, look at God. Look at God showing out. Look at God doing what only God can do. Psalm 74:16, the day is yours, and yours also the night. You established the sun and the moon. It was you who set all the boundaries of the earth. You made both summer and winter. So the same God who made all that, he can also interrupt it. He can stop it. He can end it. One day he will end it all when the world comes to an end and he takes us home to be with him. If God can't perform the miracle described in Joshua 10, as some have tried to rationalize and reason that it didn't happen, then he can't perform any miracle. And he's imprisoned in his own creation, unable to use or suspend the very laws he built into it. Warren Wiersbe would say. And one final statement: the mind which asks for a non-miraculous Christianity is a mind in process of relapsing from Christianity into mere religion. I mean, Christianity itself is based upon miracles. As we've seen, Hebrews 2, Acts 2, all these miracles sustain, prove, and verify the authenticity of Christianity. And if we remove those from that, then we have nothing. We have a religion with no power, no mystery, no glory to it. And moreover, we have nothing to prove that Jesus is who he said he was. John 20, 30 to 31, John ends his gospel, the next to the last chapter, by saying, Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, he is the Messiah, the one and only, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. And that's the beauty of this miracle we see in Joshua 10, showing us the authority of God, the power of God, and the fact that nothing is too hard for the God we serve. Thank you. Brother Tim.